Hey guys, it's Samuel Larsen here. I'm the founder of Grow Gurus. We help 6- and 7-figure e-commerce companies grow and profit. And today I'm going to cover a roadmap for Shopify store optimization. And there are different levels where you can start and a different impact and effort between those levels. So let's go straight into this one. And I'm going to cover what is called the optimization pyramid. Now, the whole idea here is that you build on top of the basis. So unless you have your baseline set and it's solid, you can't really build a pyramid. Like the top will just fall straight back down. So we'd start there with good foundations. The whole idea is that websites and e-commerce stores need to be usable and functional before they can be really persuasive. So any kind of fancy technology and copywriting will not even get a chance to influence the user unless the user can load the page quickly, for example. So we'd map this according to effort and then impact. And as you can see, these are actually connected. So normally the least effort things will actually provide the biggest impact, which is actually quite a nice thing. So with CRO, you really get this diminishing marginal returns over time. And you get a lot of reward early. And then as you progress with your program, the returns really get smaller quite quickly, actually. In order to run a really comprehensive CRO program, you do need to have a fair bit of traffic because at these top levels, it needs to be justifiable from the return on investment standpoint. So with us, and this is what I would recommend to you as well, we start from here and then we'll see how long we can go with the client and how much it makes sense to do these things, because for most stores, the 7 and 8 are just out of the question, and it would be unethical to even recommend that approach if the scale isn't there. But let's jump into this one. Let's start from the bottom, because that's where the most value is. Now, you may have seen something like this before. This is an iceberg, and it's meant to communicate the iceberg effect. So oftentimes, there's a whole lot of things underneath the surface here that you just can't see. So this is the visible part, and this is what everyone focuses on. However, here, there's an underlying problems that you are not even aware of. And these problems can drag on and drag your store's success without you ever knowing about it. So first of all, we will start with the technical analysis. Now, this is not the sexiest part of CRO. However, this is what I deem is one of the nicest things you could do, because we have a very high confidence that if we fix technical bugs from the site, it's going to improve. The way we do this is that we map out problems, operating systems with a screenshot and video, and then a URL as well, so that the developer can then go and fix those things. So if you do hire a technical QA person, ask for these 4 things, and you're going to be good. So after you have mapped your pointers, what I always recommend is rank them from impact. So what is the impact level, high, medium, or low? And then you have your prioritization there going forward. So you can continue and start from the issues that matter the most. Now on the technical part, you'd also want to do site speed analysis. So that can be a huge part there that often is neglected. Shopify stores tend to have a lot of apps. They tend to have a lot of different fonts, everything like that. And it can all bloat site speeds. Now, sites are way more complicated than they used to be 20 years ago. Even though we have faster internet than ever, things are still too slow. So the internet world has not been able to catch up to how fast the Shopify stores have grown in size. And a couple of good things here to look into as well. So if you have a lot of data, you can look into if you have drop-offs in any kind of device or browser, and then pay special attention to those ones. And also here from analytics, you can figure out which ones are the popular ones when it comes to browsers and devices and screen size. All right, so that's the technical testing part. Let's move forward to heuristic analysis. Now, heuristic analysis is really just an expert review. We just call it heuristic analysis because that's the term in the CRO industry. And this is an expert going through the site, and they can usually pretty quickly notify areas that are potential problem pointers or aren't quite right. And if that expert is a truly expert, he will also be able to tell you why that is a problem. So if they cannot really explain what and why that particular thing should be the other way and how it should be like, then most likely they don't know what they're actually talking about. So what we do is we map this out into 4 buckets. So we have distraction. Is there something causing the user to not focus on what he should be focusing on? Something drawing the user's attention away. Second bucket is friction. Is there something going on the page that might be causing doubts, hesitations, uncertainties, making things difficult? Third one is motivation. So what about the product and service? How is it presented? How is it incentivizing users to take action? And then the fourth bucket is relevancy. So does the page itself meet user expectations, both in terms of content and design? Is it easy to understand what it is? What does it do? Who is it for? That kind of thing. And we map this out into a few different sections. Again, when we do the initial review, you can use the similar one. So you'd want to look at your copywriting in general. You'd want to look at your header and footer with extra care. Product page would be the next important. Then cart page, checkout, collection pages, front page, and possible other issues, including the About Us page, would be in that order. You can map out the typical funnel steps that your visitor would take, and then go ahead and do your own heuristic analysis. However, here I'd really recommend working with an expert, because an expert can take a look at the site from a fresh perspective. Most likely, you have already done many of the changes that you think should be done, or you haven't really been able to follow up with those changes because of some friction in your own process. So there an expert can help you a lot. If you are looking to have your site audited, you can go to growgurus.com/apply, and we can take a look at if that would be an interesting project and a good mutual fit for us to take on. Anyway, let's move forward to the next one. So web analytics for CRO. Here we are looking for drop-off areas, high exit pages, high traffic pages. And this is also helping us tie that into the previous step of heuristic analysis, where you can then take a look at like, what is the page where I would get the most out of optimizing it for. And we're going to dive into this a little deeper in the slide. But before we do, make sure to subscribe and like the video if you haven't already. I shoot out a ton of content to YouTube, and you also optimize your feed this way to get better videos, better material for your brain, and optimizing your journey as an e-commerce merchant. So definitely subscribe. You're going to do yourself a big favor. Anyway, we can look into anomalies, like what is not right in this account. So for example, is your email revenue too low? Are you performing well with return visitors? How are you performing desktop versus mobile, for example? There's a lot of things we can look into, and then you can take a look at a benchmark there. It is a case where your store's numbers should be within a certain sliding scale, and if they are too high or too low, that's usually a problem. Even if it's a metric that is generally like regarded to be good if it's high, if your conversion rate is too high, that can actually be also a bit of an issue, because then you definitely aren't driving enough traffic, or your product pricing is too cheap, or something along those lines. So we want to be within that acceptable range. Now, when it comes to identifying leaks from the data, this ties into the previous one pretty well, because here you can then combine that site walkthrough analysis with data, and perhaps you disvalidate some of your initial findings from the data, or you further validate some of your assumptions or hypotheses from that previous step. And the benefit of this, doing it this way, is that you can still do the heuristic analysis with fairly fresh eyes, and then you will see from the data like whether there are actually surprises once you understand the site structure and how things are laid out. So it will enable you to do a better analysis on this part. I do think the best bang for the buck is to combine it. So you do a little bit of both, but starting with the walkthrough and then doing a bit of the GA part and then continuing with the walkthrough. But with regards to the analytics health check, we want to check if we are tracking everything we should be tracking. Is the data accurate? Do we have the right settings in Google Analytics? That kind of thing. And then we'd be checking for some common things. So is there a raw view, backup test view for testing? Is enhanced e-commerce enabled? Are query parameters set up? And that kind of thing. You can find these checklists if you'd like from Google as well. So there you can audit your own analytics account. Analytics is a tool that doesn't fully perform very well with out-of-the-box setup because it's made for every single website in the world. So a SaaS company can use it, a software company can use it, a lead generation company can use it, a news site can use it, an e-commerce site can use it, a site like YouTube can use it. So it's used by all kinds of sites, and then it just tends to be pretty default out of the box. All right, this is where a lot of people start. Most tracking analysis. So tools like Hotjar, Lucky Orange have pretty much exploded in popularity because it's an easy CRO tool that pretty much everyone can understand. However, I'd say it doesn't make sense to start from here because you get certain assumptions from this process, which then would limit you later on. So that's why we start from heuristic analysis instead of mouse tracking analysis. Also, this part can be a bit more time consuming. And once you have taken a look at a few dozen heat maps, you pretty much know how people are likely to behave. So it seems like the greatest tool ever. However, it's often just confirmation of what we already know of human behavior. Still a great tool for understanding visitor behavior on an individual page. So analytics is behavior across the entire store, page by page. So you see those like going from front page to this page. And on Hotjar or heat mapping, it is behavior on that individual page. So what does that user do? How do they scroll? That kind of thing. So Google Analytics doesn't give you the data on an individual page unless you really configure it to do so, which is possibly quite complicated if you're not experienced with that. All right, moving on. The next step is not really a research step, so to say. So this is the first one where you are pulling together what you have found so far. So this is not a particularly novel step. However, you've done all those 4 steps now. It's time to prioritize. Time to see what to do first and where to put the efforts into. So priorities are extremely important. This is a step that you should not skip. And in this kind of case, you list issues, and likely you'd want to list some numerical factors about the issues as well. So we often use impact and ease for the simplest prioritization. And this way you can then figure out what is numerically the best way to approach this problem. So you take that emotion out of it. Now, you may not always be able to test your assumptions or hypotheses, but you should still, I believe, make a statement out of it. So a simple hypothesis statement could be that we believe that by doing X, we'll be able to achieve Y, and we will know that this is true when Z. You'll still map it out so that you force yourself to think it through one more time. And for the ones that you will be able to test, you will be able to prioritize those solutions in a similar way. I'll show you a couple of frameworks for this, because I believe this is very important, not only for the CRO process itself, but every business operates with limited resources. So being able to prioritize appropriately and accurately is going to be helpful no matter what you do. So here is the first prioritization model. It's just simple. Potential, importance, ease. So there you get an average score, and you can have these be individual findings. So potential, how big of a change would that be? How big of an improvement would it be for an individual page? This is a multiplier for the traffic part. And ease is how easy is it to implement, because you'll always have a limited budget of things that you can do. Here's another one we use internally sometimes. You have impact and ease providing a total score. So here I think for most smaller clients, this kind of prioritization makes sense because it is a 50% of the impact and 50% on the complication. So for them, the budget would be 50% of this equation as opposed to 33%. However, this can of course be adapted to the client and the different businesses. So it's not so black and white. All right, next we have a step that many people think is CRO. However, we've done 5 steps already. We haven't touched this yet. So maybe you can guess it already, maybe you can't. A/B testing. So the good old split testing. Now, this is the first step that many would start from, but this is actually a step that might not even be available to you. So you can only validate your hypothesis or your assumptions if you have an adequate number of conversions. The lower your conversion numbers, the longer the test will take, and the less of a general benefit you're going to get out of it as well. If you run a small store, then being able to sell a couple of more items, it's not going to make a big difference. So in that kind of case, it might not be worthwhile for you. Now, what I typically recommend is having at least 600 conversions per variant. Of course, if you are selling a product for like 1500 US, you can do it with less as well, because then you can test more radically different things, which is supported by your revenue. So even though the development budget is bigger and requires more development work, design work, planning work, you're still plus expected value on your CRO program, if that makes sense. Now, this is also a step that looks very easy, but there's a lot of complications here. Your tests need to be coded properly. They need to be visible without flickers. You need to have a plan of like, when are you going to stop the test? You need to be understanding of the different statistics behind it. So this way you can test smart, because testing can take a lot of time and resources if it's not done right, and you're just gonna likely running in the same spot without moving anywhere. There's a whole different video about calculating sample sizes with tests. So we will link it down below. Now, often you just have to do your changes. If this test is not available for you, you'll just implement. Do your best guess and pray that it works. Usually you can go and implement most of those changes without too big of a risk. If they are well laid out, if they are well reasoned test changes, then you are on average better off doing those changes than you are not doing those changes. Good. Let's move forward to our next step. This is the qualitative research. Now, when we looked at the original iceberg, we saw that the effort goes higher and the benefit gets lower. This is exactly this kind of thing. Here we are going very in depth with surveys, chat function analysis, like analyzing chat logs, etc. And the whole idea here is that there are scenarios that you are not even aware of. These are your unknown unknowns. And here it's very nice to be able to know them. What are the issues causing people not to buy? Now, one thing you can do with this is you can map this into buckets. So in this kind of case, you could have your live chat logs, for example, booked into a word cloud. And then you can see what are the typical problem points that people are concerned about. And these can be mapped out to the individual pages as well, if your live chat tools allows for that. And then you can see where those questions are appearing. And then you can really improve the copywriting on that page and present the user with the information that they would be looking at that particular step. Another way to do this is to bucket those different responses into categories. You can do this in Google Sheets and then see which ones are common. So is it delivery related? Is it return policy related? Is it something related to trust payments? This kind of thing. So that will give you a good bit of insight into actual user behavior. And the nice thing here is that this is 100% what your users are saying, because this is the traffic that you are actually getting. As opposed to, in the next step, we'll see that it's a sort of a fake traffic, but it's more in depth. The whole idea here is that you are revealing something you don't know about. And it's quite difficult to adapt to some distant internet user that is somewhere out there. And this will give you that initial level of information. Now, let's see how we can take it a step further and go deeper with this. So the next step is user testing. Now, there are two ways to do user testing. You can do unmoderated user testing, or you can do moderated user testing. So unmoderated is that you have a set of questions and they go through the site, trying to answer those questions, following those tasks, etc. Moderated is where you're actually watching them and you can ask questions related to their experience. So you can get a little bit more in depth and dive deeper into that. And there you usually get a little bit of an empathetic perspective, but it's also a bit more complicated, a bit more time consuming, and a bit more in depth. So that's an additional level of cost as well. You have to be there in person. There's a couple of online tools for this. A popular one, for example, is Usability Hub. So they will run these kind of surveys or tests for you, where people are going through your site, commenting and asking those questions. Now, there's also an old school method to this. You can just go to a cafe, pay somebody a few bucks, ask people to go through the site, what they think about it, perform different actions, and see if they are getting into problems. So this saves you a little bit of cost. And actually, even though this is step 8, this is something that you can do if you do it yourself as even in an early step, because then you will not need that traffic that you'd need on the other areas. Just a couple of things here. You'd want to have a question stack that is similar to all those visitors, so you will get to compare those responses. If there are 1 or 2 one-offs, that won't throw you away, and get like 5 to 10 people at least. Try to influence them as little as possible. People tend to be quite polite as well, so take that into account. Don't be afraid to dig deep into what are the potential problems and frustrations. I'd say also better to ask open-ended questions rather than like strict yes-no questions here. That is the optimization pyramid. So to wrap up, we have technical analysis, heuristic analysis, web analytics, analysis. Now normally these 3 are wrapped together because it makes a lot of sense to do all of them at once. What we do at GrowGurus, we actually map out the first 5 steps together, because this is the research part, and we will never start A/B testing before we have first done these parts here. So we follow what we preach here, and definitely follow this model. This has been proven with us through like dozens of clients. Now, on an ongoing basis, you definitely want to run an A/B testing if you can profitably run it. And then the last 2 steps are more optional. However, startups, they tend to not do enough qualitative research. They tend to not know their users well enough. So if you have never run any kind of research, you probably can benefit a lot from this as well. But keep in mind this, where we started. They tend to be more effort as you go further, and they tend to reduce in impact. So if you are doing user testing, especially in one of these platforms like Usability Hub, or even getting an agency to do it for you, you better have either funding behind you or quite a bit of sales to be able to then make it worthwhile. Because we are more like talking about a few percentage improvements at most. All right, that's that. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. If you'd like to work with me or my team, you can head out to www.growgurus.com/apply. Any questions about this? I'd be happy to answer them in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.